Hey guys, sorry about this. Just a moment, I'll be right with you. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. Sorry about taking those 2 extra minutes there. Had a pretty critical email come in right at 4 o'clock that I needed to fire off. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Remember that these live sessions that we do are for the module ahead. So since module 2 is due tonight by 11:59 p.m., we want to go ahead and start module 3 today. And a little bit of module 3 here is going to be a rehash or a review, I guess we should say, some of the things that we did last week as well. All right, so ideally by the end of the day today, what I want us to be able to do is click a button on our website and have it change a value on our site. Right, that's going to be our goal for today, since we are talking about handling user events. Right, we've talked about events in other classes. An event is something like, a button press, a form field input, some way that you are interacting with the application, right? And so in this case, we are going to be introducing a new event, which is going to be the button press, and we're going to be making our button press interact with our site. And so the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to create my new project here. I should hit CD before I enter that. E:// and we will create a new project. So that'll be npx create react app mod 3. Let's call it. And we will give that a couple minutes here to do its thing. But yeah, while this is doing its thing, let's just talk briefly about events, right? And let me also make sure I have my command somewhere over here that I needed last week to disable the ESLint plugin. Yep, I got it right here, just in case I need that. So with the exception of kind of what we were doing for the lab last week, right? The lab last week kind of bridged together just a little bit the idea of components and then re-rendering. So to be able to complete the current lab, the Module 2 lab, in order to be able to complete the Module 2 lab, you kind of had to look forward to the future just a little bit because of this idea of an event and how events work in React. And so one of the interesting things about React in general is that it, as we've talked about over the last several weeks, is that it has this virtual DOM, this virtual document object model that kind of creates another layer between the DOM and the user, right? And it allows us to do a lot of things on the fly, which is really useful and beneficial. But one of the big things that we're dealing with here is that, as we saw last week, as we were starting to approach this topic, things don't necessarily re-render by default. right? We actually have to force something to re-render. Right, so we can start with our application here and start to look at some examples. So let's get into CD mod 3 here. Let's open it up. Right, so that'd be code-r period. And then in our terminal, we will run npm start. So we can see our sample site on our development server. All right, we are going to save this, and then I'm going to run that. I'm going to Control C to terminate my server. And I'm going to run that ESLint plugin disabler, that command that I mentioned last week. So I'm going to run npm install ESLint -plugin -disable --save -dev. And that'll keep me from it would help me if I spelled it right. ESLint -plugin -disable. That'll prevent me from having to resave the package file every time, and it'll make things nice and easy when we try to push it to GitHub pages later on. I spelled two things wrong here. Goodness, it is quite an afternoon. disable. Typos abound. Let's see if we got it right this time. There we go. Now we're good to go. So now we can npm start again. And now our application should just open right up. Excuse me? It still did the fail to compile thing. Let's try that again. I hate all this troubleshooting, but maybe some of you are having to go through it as well. So let's Control C to stop our server. And let's try to run that ESLint plugin disable again. Maybe it didn't work like we thought it worked. Let's see here. Up to date. And this again is, one of the more annoying things about React, right? Like we've seen over the last few weeks as we've been using it, that it allows us to do a lot of great things. But it is a bit finicky and annoying sometimes. So let's just let it work here, and then we'll see what happens, and if it's still broken, we'll just roll with it. And it might just be a while before I send you all the files for this one, so because I might have to do some deeper troubleshooting and fixing. Either way, it'll be okay, right? This week isn't the important one anyway. It's more next week. That's the big important one. So we'll be all right. We'll just give this a minute or two here to do its thing. All right, so now let's try to NPM start one more time. And it's completely blown up now. Great. So in this event, what I would normally do is close this folder and create a new one. So let's try again. CD e:/web 285 npx create react app mod-3-new. And we'll just give it another minute here. Let's play some music while we're waiting. All right, so now let's try this. CD mod-3-new. And I also looked up another solution to my ESLint problem that we'll try here. So I will code dash that dot. And this time what I want to do is I want to find the environment file. Which I believe is in here somewhere. Let's see here. Can I... Can I find it? So it's not one. So since it doesn't look like it makes one for us, Then we probably just need to make our own in the root here. That'll be what we need to do. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it .env. And I'm going to paste that line of code in it. Disable ESLint plugin true. And we'll give that a nice save. Now let's try this. npm start. All right, that seems better. Here we go. We got our file up. We got no ESLint errors, so we're good to start working. Finally, that took a little more time troubleshooting that than I would have liked, but it's okay, right? And, one of the things that we want to be able to kind of troubleshoot our own things and do things like that. So doing a little bit of troubleshooting on the fly here doesn't hurt anybody. We'll go into our app.js file now, and I'm just gonna, let's see here. Let's just delete everything out of the return here for our app. And we won't need the logo anymore, so we can delete that reference. We'll just let everything else kind of go. So let's create ourselves a new component here. And let's see, what do I want to call this component? Let's just call it counter. So I'm going to create a constant called counter. And that's going to be a value. We need to bring a prop into it, so let's bring props into it. Especially later on when we start to use state like we did last week. We need that props. And we need to create a const for counter. So we'll call this one count so as to not confuse it with the name of our function, and we'll set it equal to the value for props. And then we will return the count. So we will return, let's say, an h1 with our count inside of it. And then in our app here, we will just we'll create a container div, and we'll put counter inside of it. So from here, right, like we're bringing this in as a prop. And a prop specifically that we are calling count. So we need to be able to bring this in with count equals something, right? So let's, outside of the function here, kind of at the global level, let's create a variable. Let's create a variable. It'll be let C, and we'll set it equal to 1. And we will set count here equal to C. Right, like so. So that way when we save this, we just get a big 1 here. Right, just got a big 1 here. Now, but what we might expect in other programming languages is that if we were to increment C here, and say like C plus equals 1, Or actually, I'd want to do that somewhere else because that's happening before this occurs, right? So I'd want to actually do that inside of here. So let's say we set count. So we might assume, right, that when we go into our counter function here and we set count plus equal to 1, right, that it's going to bring in the value as my prop, then add 1 to it here, and then give me 2 on the output. But it doesn't do that, right? And let's actually change this from a const to a let here. And we might think that each time we do this, that it's going to add, or where do I want to put this? Maybe here. Maybe because I have that at... trying to think of a good place to put it. That this is actually going to work and make sense to everybody. Makes it a little tough. Maybe we should actually just try doing it with our button. That might... just go ahead and bring our button into it. And try to do things that way, right? Because we said that React is built off of JavaScript. So then we'd be able to work off of JavaScript to do that. That might make some sense if we were to bring a button into it this way and have the button increment our value of C. So let's say here in let's we add a we have a button that we add in here, and we write click me on it. And then somewhere we take that button and we add an event listener, right? So let's try that out. So like document dot add event listener button. And we can have another function here. We can call it increment. And then in our increment function, const increment, we can take the value of C. We can just return C plus equals 1. There we go. That's a good way to put it to where it might make more sense. Right, because if we did this in a JavaScript application, right, we might expect the value to update, right? But since we're doing this, this value isn't updating, right? I can click this as much as I want, and the value is not updating because the container that is holding the prop that is working with C here and our button, it needs to be re-rendered in order for it to work, right? So we need to be able to render this function again, right? So maybe we do that on incrementation here. So we have C plus equals 1. Let's get rid of the return statement here and just say C plus equals 1, and then we can rerun counter. And we can rerun it with the value of C. That's something, again, that might make sense to us. Right? Because we're coming from the land where, this is how JavaScript kind of worked, right? But again, this is something that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't work, right? I mean, if I were to take maybe counter out here and run it, let's give that a try. Still doesn't work, right? So, this is just another way to kind of just show ourselves that, the way that we're dealing with this doesn't necessarily work the exact same way that we might expect something to in JavaScript, right? And I think we kind of saw that last week, and now we're seeing it again. So just like we were doing last week, one of the things that we want to do here is we actually want to use a state for this button press, right? And so if we're going to use a state, we're going to want to be able to import the state hook is the term that I'm looking for from the React library. So I'm going to import use state from React. And that's from React in quotes. And now it's kind of grayed out here because I've imported it, but I've not used it yet. So a better way to handle this in a more React way is going to be not to mess with these outside variables and to create a stateful component in here with our counter. And so if you'll remember back to last week, right, one of the things that we did was we looked at using our state component for use state. We talked about use state and set state or set counter, so on and so forth, right? So we would do this, we would have a count, and we would have a set count. And we would set that equal to use state 0, right? If we started it with some value. So now we've got a better way to do this, right? Like we're actually using the state, but it's not passing anything back, right? Because we have this going, and this is set, and this is presenting a count, and this is kind of weird. So let's fix this, right? We need to take this button outside of here and wrap the whole thing in a div so we have one parent. Because putting it all in the H1 is kind of weird. So let's do that. And so what we want to do from here is we want to be able to set this count. Right? We can use our button to set the count. And so what I want to do here is I want to look at my button that I have here. And I want to add a reference to my set counter function or set count function into here. That will update this value in turn. And then we can kind of see where we need to go from there, right? So I can, inside of my opening button tag, we can add an on click and set it equal to a function. So inside of curly braces, I actually write arrow notation function references here. There's the event handler itself in React is a function. And so React uses these event handlers a little bit differently. And we can actually define it here in our onClick hook, right? So this is where we would actually put this information. So I empty parentheses, arrow, which is my equals greater than, and then I can reference my set count and take the value of count and add 1 to it. And that should be set count. So this also means that we don't need props here. And we can get rid of this reference here as well. What have I missed here? Let's see. I have made an oopsie, but I don't know which one I made. Let's see if we can figure it out. Increment is not defined. Did I write increment? Where am I using increment? Oh, here. Duh, yeah, that was, this whole event listener was from before. I can get rid of that whole event listener now. Duh. I had left that there. And did I miss anything else? Let me check my notes here. Let me check my, I got to check my notes here just to see what I've done. Because I'm going to, just be honest, and I'm not entirely on my game today. I'm a little off. Not feeling very well. So I want to make sure I didn't skip anything here. Because there definitely is a set count defined here. So let's change this up, because there is another way that we can reference this. And we can just reference it as the function reference itself here. So let's try that. And that's also broken and telling me set count is not a function. Even though it is, it very much is. am I missing? I gotta be overlooking something here. This is strange. Let me just troubleshoot for a second, folks. Give me just a minute here. This is the code. What am I? Let's try it this way again. React is finicky. That should just be my starting value. Oh, goodness. Bad day. Just a bad day. I bet there's a typo I'm missing somewhere. Yep, there is. Because this is supposed to be an array and not curly braces. Goodness gracious, how long did it take me to notice that against my notes? Ah! So now I've got this, and when I click this button, it's going to increment. Yeah. That's what we want to do, right? We want to take... Oh, not my day. Not my day. So that gets us a user state, right? And we can do this with basically anything. One of the things that we're going to talk about next week is we're going to talk about being able to, take data from an input form field and on button click use that data in a different place, right? That's going to be one of the big parts of the live class next week. In fact, I might just, since this has been mostly just me trying to troubleshoot, I might just, instead of putting this video out as the recording, just record a static video and send that to you all instead. So we're going to stop here because I've obviously had enough of a time today. With troubleshooting and overlooking small mistakes. But that just goes to show you that it happens to me too. I mean, we did get to the point where we wanted to be, right? I said I wanted to be at a point by the end of the class today where I could click a button and make a number go up. And we can do that. So let's go ahead and stop for today. We'll go back, we'll re-record this, we'll make it nice and clean. That's what I'll put out for tomorrow. So that's all that I have for you for today. Important ones coming next week anyway. So we'll be all right. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.